Okay. All right, call to order the January 18th Measure J Commission meeting. Ariana, could you do roll call, please?
Commissioner Bixson? Here. Commissioner Craig? Here. Commissioner Gazan? Here. Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Vice Chair Hammond?
Here.
Chair Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Marshall?
Here.
Commissioner Vogel? Commissioner Williams?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, okay. Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Williams, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Down a little bit. Okay, acceptance of the agenda. The Measure J Commission will discuss the order of the agenda and may amend the order. Is there any discussion or issues around the existing agenda? Do I hear a motion to accept the agenda?
I move.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Approval of the minutes. We were dark in December, so it's the November 16, 2017 minutes. Again, any discussion around the minutes? Yes.
In one place, there is, it's 5C of the minutes. There is a discussion that there is a subcommittee, but there's no name or subject for the subcommittee.
Page 5.
And I'm on it, so I'm not,
That was the communication.
I second that.
That was a
It's the
communication
communication subcommittee.
Yeah, to deal with the medallion and the things that we talked
Yeah.
about. It's you, me, and
If you
Jim.
go to the
We
bottom
should
of the
meet, but we
page.
haven't done it.
Yeah, the action is right below.
Yeah, the action is at the bottom of the page.
It doesn't say communication.
No, it says that up here. Okay.
I had that same question, that it was not clear what subcommittee was going to be created. I saw who was going to be part of it, but not what the purpose of the subcommittee was.
Okay. Got it. All right, okay. Do we need to put a note on that?
I will make the.
Okay, all right.
One other comment. I was reading about the 5B, the discussion of the Measure J communication strategy, and my question was, what is the actual strategy? I don't see it here.
I'm sorry, where were we at?
5B
5B.
on the minutes.
Well, that's when Amy talked about
I remember
strategy.
Amy being here and talking and showing a video, but this does not talk about what the actual communication strategy is.
Well, I don't think it's done yet. I think that's why we have the subcommittee, to get together and talk about it further with Amy. And so they will together work through it.
Okay.
That was my understanding anyway. Does anybody? Is that all right? All right. Okay. All right. Go to my January. Okay, public comment. This. Oh, I'm sorry. On the minutes. Okay.
I move we approve the minutes with corrections about the committee.
Okay.
I second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Okay. Abstain? Oh, okay, all right. Not dissenting, but abstaining, okay. Okay, public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address Measure J Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Although the Measure J Commission values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned for each speaker. Do we have any public comments? Oh, we have one. Okay. Over here probably would be best. Yeah. Yeah. Just to note, the commissioners aren't allowed to respond, so don't look at that as disinterest if they don't respond.
I'll try not to take it.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Stanley Bischow, and I'm a homeowner at Four Seasons in Palm Springs. And I'm bringing you some information. I guess I spoke with Ariana or emailed Ariana regarding an issue that came to my attention regarding the storm catchment drain system in the north area of Palm Springs. We continue to have almost catastrophic flooding on the area between San Rafael and via Escuela on Sunrise. And I did some investigation and found out that there is no catchment system that's attached to any drainage. So all of the drains along Sunrise are basically French drains. And once they fill up, it floods the street. So did some more kind of investigation about what was going on. And apparently the city made the decision they weren't going to extend the drainage system for some other reason. I'm not quite sure why. And it seems like there's a huge liability issue here with the city that we probably need to address. I did ask our homeowners association to send, I guess, Mr. Johnson a letter regarding this. I don't know if you received it yet.
I received an email from. I did receive an email from Ariana. She passed it on to me.
Okay. I tried to get some information from the city engineer, Mr. Fuller, regarding what engineering was done prior for this, because I assume there'd been some work done on this. And he came up with a figure that because it was too expensive, like $6 million, and the city only has $1 million to deal with drainage. So I thought I'd bring it to this committee's attention. I don't know what the process is as far as getting on the agenda. I was trying to get that with Ariana, so we're just going to do the public comment thing at this point. Some of the issues were, it's basically a safety issue. I mean, my profession, right, I'm an RN, and I've been an RN for 40 years. And I've seen spin-outs and slides and whatnot, and I think the city's really got a liability issue when there might be a fatality, you know, at any place on that Sunrise area. And actually witnessed a couple of things happen like that. Not fatalities so far. I think it fits the mission or the funding that the Measure J intent was for infrastructure. And the north area of Palm Springs is being expanded. We have 2 more, I guess, shovel-ready developments that are going to be done. We have a lot of the work as far as we're going to be expanding the Sunrise to become a thoroughfare. So the traffic is going to only increase. I guess we're going to bring Sunrise around to Indian Canyon. Excuse me, just getting over the flu again. That's really the only route for our area and most of the north area to go to shopping. So it's hard to get an alternate route when that's flooding, so people tend to still use it even though there's flooding that's happened. The city doesn't come and pump out the water. Usually it's just left there to, I don't know where it goes, to be honest with you. Again, the exact cost is not known. I tried to obtain that. I tried to obtain the engineering that was done, but I haven't been able to do that. Really, the engineering that was done at the setup of the street probably is not adequate because of the flooding. There wasn't enough drains put in place, I guess.
I'm afraid your time is up.
Okay,
Your 3 minutes is up, but thank you very much.
okay.
Okay, well, moving right along. First of all, welcome everybody to our very first 2018 meeting. I'm going to be quick because we have a lot to cover today. So basically, I'd like to introduce Sid Craig and David Gray as our newest commissioners. And Sid, could you just talk about 2 minutes about yourself and why you were interested in Measure J?
I sat in this room and watched 92 people being interviewed for these seats when it started, and I watched for 2 days. Oh, thank you. And I knew it was something that I was interested in, but I wanted to wait and see how it worked, and how money was being spent and being allocated. In that period of time, this is my third commission. I was on the Parks and Recreation currently, and was on the Human Rights Commission. And I just felt that I have enough of support being a community activist to want to be involved and see if I can lend my support and my ideas to the table.
David, would you like to say a few words? Thanks.
Sure. A lot of you on this committee probably know who I am, but for those who don't, I moved to Palm Springs in 2003, and my professional life has always been in public relations and communication, and up until last year I had a company. In October I closed that company, but I'm sort of fully retired now. But prior to this, my activities here in Palm Springs, I served on the Board of Trustees with the library for 9 years. And like this committee, unlike this committee, but that committee has a trust fund, and we spent a lot of money on what I would consider infrastructure, especially during the downturn when the city didn't have funds for things like library roofs and other things that had to be done. So after retiring and closing my business, I wanted to see what else I might be able to do with the city, and thought of Measure J because I feel like my experience with funds and infrastructure and working with government would be useful, and so here I am.
All right, thank you very much. The next thing is the city manager's report. Dr. Reddy?
Good afternoon, everyone. I would note the gentleman who spoke in public comment, I'm not familiar with that case, but I will get briefed from Tom and Marcus, and what we'll do is we will communicate back with him, and when we come back to this meeting next month, we can just give you a little update on what the particulars are and if there's any particular path that we might be able to remedy that. So we'll be happy to do that. So if you could give me that information.
They will be addressing it under item 4. Marcus will be giving the...
Perfect. There you go. Great. Even better. Even better. Okay. I just wanted to note a couple things, if I could, and welcome to the new members. Well, the great news is, for all your efforts on Measure J, another little piece of the puzzle is happening today. H&M and the Mac store downtown in the new Measure J development is open. Those two stores have opened today. H&M and the Mac store, so this is very exciting.
Cosmetics. Cosmetics. I only know because I walked by it.
I also wanted to let you know that one of the things I was talking with Marcus about, the assistant city manager, and what we're going to do is there's a lot of public capital projects out there. Many of them are Measure J. On a monthly basis, we're going to start sending a report to City Council as a receive and file, which is basically going to be an update of where we are in those projects. You know, the fire station, the police station, downtown park, all those, and a lot of the other projects that you have. So everyone is going to be very clear on where we are in the process, what the next step is, have we fallen behind, and what do we need to do to get back on track. So that'll be a monthly report. That same report, you've been seeing a version of it basically for Measure J projects, so we'll make sure you see that as well, and I think that will help keep us all on track. And then if there's questions on any of them, the City Council obviously will have an opportunity to ask some questions and go from there. Okay. And finally, I would just note that on your later on your agenda is a discussion on the Buzz Trolley. We are hoping to have, well, we are planning on having that agendized at the council meeting, first council meeting in February, which is the 5th, 7th, somewhere 4th. And as part of that presentation, we're going to be doing a couple things. We're going to be reviewing what the ridership statistics are. We're going to be discussing what some of the revenue possibilities are. Our sponsorship person has been working on that. We're going to talk about how we could save some dollars potentially on reducing the times. And then also, we're going to give council an opportunity to look at a route change where instead of having one long route, you have two routes coming from the outside in and back out. And that has some benefit that I think would be helpful in the long term. That being said, that will just be a menu of items, nothing set in stone. There's no real recommendation. Council will analyze it, give us some recommendations, and then we will go from there. Okay? So if that's helpful for your discussion today, then you may want to weigh in at that meeting as well. Okay? So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions? No?
Okay. And since this is an agenda day, I'm going to ask to take my leave. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot. Next is the Finance Director's report and review of the annual measure audits. Mr. Keel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Welcome to our new commissioners. Glad to see you here. You have before you the report that reflects the activity through December 31st on page 1 of item 3. I'll quickly go through that, take a little bit extra time for the benefit of our new commissioners. So the way the Measure J fund is accounted for is all of the funds that come in for Measure J come into the general fund because Measure J is a general revenue tax, which means the funds can be used for absolutely any source at all. It's really not legally restricted at all. However, our city council at the time of Measure J's passage made the commitment to have some special focus on how we spend Measure J funds with emphasis to be on capital projects. But even so, that's not limited legally for capital projects. But what we do is every time we receive any payment of revenue from the state for sales taxes, which comes in about 16 times a year, we transfer to the penny that money into a special segregated Measure J fund. It's not restricted in the sense that it has to stay there. In the event of a fiscal emergency or whatever kind of crisis arises, council has complete flexibility to move all of that money back to the general fund if they want to. Something we don't talk about a lot, but I think is very important for the commissioners to understand, what it is and what it is not. So we do have a separate fund, and this reflects all of the activity for that fund. There are just a few projects listed here on this page, but there's about 30 other projects that are in the works from prior years. What happens is once we have a budget set for an item, it goes from the commission as a recommendation to the council, they approve it. Once we go through and actually do the work for that project, if there's money left over, it goes back into this line that's basically at the bottom here where it says net funds available for budgeting, that very last line. So for example, in 2017-18, we currently have $335,000 that is not assigned to any particular project. The very first number that you see there, the $793,000, is what was left over at the end of last year. And this is the first time you're seeing that figure, I believe. Well, actually, no, I think you have seen it since then, unaudited actuals. So that reflects all of the activity, all of the projects that were completed and closed out in money that was available, budgeted but not spent, gets put back in this account once a project has been declared completed. If a project goes over that amount, staff has the discretion of moving smaller amounts of money from that account into another account. We have an agreement that has been presented to the city council and based upon the recommendation of the commission, that if a project significantly goes over the amount that was budgeted, then the city should find other ways of covering those costs. So from time to time, we have a project that will go over, and we do have $1 million set aside in a different fund that can be used to help cover those significant overages. There are times, however, where if a project looks like it's going over and that early budget number that was put out there ends up being short, such as for the police department remodel, then we've come back to the commission, presented the facts, and periodically the commission has the opportunity to recommend increasing that budget out of Measure J funds and presenting that to council. So that's an example of what happened with the police department remodel project. As part of the budget process, we added an extra $500,000 to this year's budget from what was originally allocated, well, a year and a half ago when we first started this process. That's a lot of information for you, so I'll leave that. So before I go on to the audits, are there any questions regarding this? Yes, sir.
So in the 2017-18, you showed that the net funds available for budgeting is $335,012. That's saying that's rolling over into 2018 now?
Yes, and I thank you for asking that. That allows me to clarification. You also notice that projected revenue number, 13.4 million. It's the second number at the top. So if that's high or low, that affects this number at the bottom too. And at this point, that's our projection, but these numbers move quite a bit. So it's kind of good that we have a little bit of money still sitting there. Yeah, a little cushion. Thank you. June 30th, yes. And then the books actually get closed on these projects about 3 or 4 months later. The final revenue for Measure J comes in near the end of September. So everything kind of lags about 3 months. Any other questions on this page?
Just on the Andes, have we heard any more information about that, the Hyatt, whether they think they're going to?
I'll defer to Marcus on that one.
They are still moving forward, as we can see, so I don't have a completion date, but it's possible they'll be completed by the end of this year, into the early part of 2019. So it's conceivable that payment will be due in 18-19.
All right, yeah, Commissioner Wood.
On that subject, could you just clarify for the new commissioners and a review for us what that money, that $2 million, I know it's parking, but you can tell us more of the details.
The council approved an agreement where we're providing a $2 million payment to acquire public parking part of that project. So on the north side of that project, adjacent to Alejo, will be something on the order of 100 spaces that will be reserved for public parking purposes. And so that payment was an incentive for that public parking. And it's due and payable at the time the project's complete and open.
Will that be free parking?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this is a future expenditure from Measure J. We're going to be paying them $2 million.
It is, and it's a legal obligation to the city, and it was approved by council previously, and we have had it a couple of years back in the 16-17 budget, and we keep pushing it out as that project kind of stalled for a while.
And again, this was before me. So $2 million paid at the completion of the project, and any additional maintenance costs, or we're free and clear. We have 100 parking spaces for public use, no additional upkeep cost.
That's a good question. I haven't looked at the agreement in a while. It's all part of his building, but I'll have to go back and verify the maintenance obligations of that.
And if there were maintenance, at this point, it would fall under general fund, not Measure
It
J?
has not been identified as a Measure J expense yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
And one final note on this page. Of course, all of these numbers that you see in columns with 2018, 19 moving forward, these represents projections of revenue and commitments which are not binding at this point for even that next year. It's just the signal that the council has given prior, such as we're going to spend $3 million a year on streets. That's been a commitment. Every year, the new budget year's figures get adopted. It's recommended from the commission and forwarded to the council. But council isn't bound to these numbers, so they always have the opportunity to change. But these are based upon current commitments and what the commission has previously basically okayed in prior years. Okay, I'm going to flip over to the audit reports now. So, again, for the benefit of the new commissioners in particular, we have 2 audits that are actually being done on Measure J. The Measure J language required a annual audit for the Measure J funds. It was one of the few legal requirements of the Measure J ballot language, that both revenues and expenditures would be validated by an audit. At the time we were looking to comply with this, the thought was it would be good to hire a local accounting firm to do that audit. At the time, we contracted with Marinoff Madsen, a local firm, very respected. And since Measure J's inception, they've been doing an annual agreed-upon procedures review, which is not a full-scale audit. We can't really call it an audit. To CPAs, they're the only ones that care about this stuff. If it were an audit, they would have to be reviewing all the internal controls of the city. It would be a very expensive kind of thing. To just do that for the benefit of Measure J could cost $30,000 or $40,000. We didn't want to do that, especially since our regular independent auditors are always obligated to review those areas anyway. We didn't want to pay twice. But we did want to have an extra focus on Measure J expenditures. So if you turn to page 3 of this item, this is the Marinoff Madsen report, and I just want to note a couple of things. First of all, the second paragraph, they note they verified all the revenues, and this third paragraph says they've verified the expenditures, and they tested 91% of the transactions. That's a ridiculously high number as a percentage. So our regular independent auditors, under their generally accepted accounting standards, have no obligation to test anywhere near that level, and they don't. It would be very expensive if they were doing that for all our funds. So, but we always wanted the Measure J funds to be tested at a higher level. So this is the standard that the Marinoff Madsen auditors used. I can't tell you exactly what the threshold was, but it's obviously a very low dollar amount to be testing that high of a percentage of the transactions. So as you'll see with both those paragraphs, they note they had no findings or exceptions. And on the next page, you'll note they're right in that bold number right near the top of the middle column. You see that's the $793,000 figure that appears on the page that we just reviewed a minute ago. That was the leftover funds before we got into the new year. Now, the second report is beginning on page 5, and I would direct you to page 7. At the bottom paragraph says, in our opinion, everything seems accurate, basically. And on page 15, our opinion that the city complied in all material aspects for Measure J. Again, that statement is in all material aspects because they don't audit every single transaction. So with that, I'll entertain any questions from the commissioners.
I have one question. I just think it's a math error possibly in the page 10 of 16. It was 13,407,184. If you go back to the spreadsheet, it's 13,407,180. This is the total revenues and transfers in. And I'm not sure what happened, but it looks like it was just an arithmetic mistake.
No, it's actually not an arithmetic mistake. It's interesting that we don't have a process for doing budget adjustments on interfund transfers. But in order to get that dollar amount of the 793 to come out to the penny what it's supposed to be, I go ahead for this report, I artificially change the budget amount for all of these items. For example, the interest income, we never budget that. So it's always zero. And we also budget an exact number of $3.2 million for the interfund transfer in, where it really turned out to be $3,186,000. So that extra 14 added a little bit of extra money to this closing, basically unrestricted balance number.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, all right, thanks.
Yeah. It's a good question.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Great job.
Appreciate it. This is the most important piece, in my opinion, for this commission's obligation, is to have a little extra public scrutiny on how we're accounting for the funds. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving right along. Go. Oh, Measure J projects update report. Do we have anything before the unfunded?
We do.
Oh, okay.
Honorable Chair and Vice Chair and Commission members. And just because I'm an engineer, for the new commissioners, one thing you might have noticed is that these microphones do not tilt anywhere except for here. So if you're pulling down, you're going to break it off at the stem. So try to adjust it to your mouth. It's not going to happen. All right, now that bit of housekeeping is over, we have some updates on the Measure J, the current Measure J projects, starting with 1701, which is the citywide street maintenance. That is currently under construction. The contractor we've had some issues with some of the roads that have been paved, but the contractor is going to be going back and doing some repair work in the February-March timeframe. So that one's ongoing. Also for next year, 18-01, which is our fiscal year 17-18 road rehab project. The list of streets has been prepared and is being circulated for review. We'll be taking comments on those streets and then formalizing that at a later date. The police department remodel is in construction. The swim center replaster construction has been completed. The contract hasn't been closed out yet. We're doing punch list items, but the pool is open. The roof replacement is in construction. The evaluation of all city facilities, that one, we're updating the database on that because it was prepared prior to all these Measure J projects that are improving the facilities. So That database is being updated, and then we are scheduling training for the various users and the level of use that they're going to get. So that one is ongoing. The downtown electrical upgrade, I had mentioned before that we had sent the plans out to our on-call electrical consultants to clean them up and add some additional details and service points and work with Edison. We received proposals on that on January 30th. And I believe Franco would have some updates on the fire station and other Measure J projects, the bollards.
Absolutely. To expand on Tom's list, we have, as you've noticed, we've began with the sidewalk gap closures. So on Racket Club between Sunrise to Vistachino on that southerly, westerly side of the roadway, we're improving our sidewalks there. Also on Indian and Racket Club, I believe, on the easterly side, we're doing some sidewalk improvements. The North Palm Canyon crosswalk, the ones that are located on Stevens and Via Las Palmas, those will be ramping up early February. We're anticipated to start mobilizing to the site. And Fire Station 4 is currently out to bid. We are hoping to get a good amount of competitive bids for this project. Bids are scheduled to be opened and read out loud March 1st, Thursday. It's a 45-day bid duration, a little longer than our normal 30, but with the amount of work and the complexity of this project, we're hoping to extend it a little longer and get better bids. Thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Hammond.
Are you, I know that the North Palm Canyon sidewalk project has been on the table now for some time, but have you received any information on the possibility that one of those sidewalks or crosswalks might benefit pedestrians a little bit more if it got moved slightly? And I'm just saying that I had a resident contact me about those two sidewalks, one at Stevens, one at Via Las Palmas, I think. And I was told that when the hospital shifts get out, or let out, when employees leave the hospital, they jaywalk across Indian, and then they jaywalk across Palm Canyon, essentially walking through the parking lot at the liquor store, and that perhaps if, I don't think they stop at the liquor store, but perhaps that it would be worth observing to see if the sidewalk were, or if the crosswalk were moved just a little bit, if the hospital staff will use it. And otherwise, it might be worth talking to somebody at the hospital to educate the hospital staff to use crosswalks, period, and not jaywalk.
Right.
But I know that they're, just from the contact I've had over there, they're very sensitive to pedestrian issues, especially with colliding with cars.
Right.
So Tom is smiling, but it doesn't sound like that's something that you've heard about.
Okay.
Mid-block crossings are notoriously unsafe.
Okay.
They're, right now, I really wouldn't be in favor of mid-block crossing.
Okay.
I would be more in favor of education outreach and putting up possible barriers to prevent that type of crossing.
So that's an exception to the mid-block crosswalks we've already established on Palm Canyon downtown?
That is in the lower speed zone.
Okay.
Commissioner Williams?
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Are you talking about crosswalks?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I had that comment made to me by a former commissioner. So the problem with moving that crosswalk where we've identified it is there's conflicting driveways and other improvements. So I looked at whether we could push it further south, but it just doesn't work because of the driveway for the liquor store, where the bus stop is, and where the Denny's driveway is. So the location of it right at the intersection with Via Las Palmas is really the only place we can locate the crosswalk. And, you know, it will happen. At both of these new crosswalks, people will jaywalk 50 feet from it, 10 feet from it, in it, without using the button. I've yelled at people, I said, use the button.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just wanted to relay the experience we had with street paving on our street. I live on Verita Sur, and we had signs go up that Verita Sur was going to be reconstructed between Palm Canyon and Mirasol the following week. So everybody scurried around to make plans and change things, and then the following week, signs went up that it would be done the next week. So it was delayed a week. Okay. So the next week, the signs went up, it would be delayed yet another week. So the third week, they actually came, but they only did, even though they said they were going to do the whole street, they only did half the street. They did between Camino Centro and Mirasol, but they did not do between Camino Centro and Palm Canyon. And I have no idea why, but I was just curious if there's a way I could find out, because my neighbors were saying, why did our street, our part of the street, not get paved?
I can look into that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Craig.
I just wanted to say, I live at Gene Autry in Seven Lakes, and construction is going on our street right now, which I have to say, from experiencing being on 1PS and hearing the reports that have been given by Christine, seeing it firsthand, it's really something to see how that machinery is moving in the last 3 days to get the asphalt up, the way they're working, these massive machines. I've never seen anything like it. And I look out my window and I'm seeing it. And I just want to say it is something special that is being done, and I'm really thrilled that it's, and they're doing a good job. They really are.
I want to add one more note. I don't know who the contractor is, but they were really efficient and they were really, really nice as well. You ask them a question and they would say, well, we'll be finishing that tomorrow. You can drive on it in 4 hours, or I wouldn't drive on it for at least 4, you know, that sort of thing. So everybody was pleased. It just only did half the street. So I was just curious why. Maybe they ran out of money. I don't know.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to old business, 5A, which is a report from staff, continued report on unfunded capital. And for the new commissioners, just so you know, there's unfunded capital projects coming in ongoing all the time. Of course. So we're not going to make any decisions tonight. And so tonight, we'd just like to use the 80-20 rule. If there's a big ticket item you have a question about, great, please ask. If it's a smaller ticket item, you can always call Jeff or Marcus or Thomas separately and talk to them about it. I just wanted to point that out. So, Thomas, are you going to?
The gentleman that was here requesting, which actually falls under unfunded capital projects. At least this is a request from this gentleman representing Four Seasons?
Four Seasons, right.
Four Seasons. I missed his comments, but I believe his comments were related to funding line 3 on our master drainage plan. There's a lot of the city's master plan of drainage that hasn't yet been implemented. The city has paid for major drainage improvements through drainage impact fees that we collect a little bit at a time with each building permit that's issued. There's certain acreage fees that are paid to mitigate the increased runoff of stormwater due to development of a site. And depending on the size of the property, it could be a couple $100 to a couple $1,000. So we don't accumulate a lot of drainage fees over time. And I believe we have on fund balance in the drainage fund, which is a separate fund from the general fund or Measure J fund, about $1 million. And the city's top priority for over 10 years has been to construct what's called Line 41, which is along East Palm Canyon, extending from Cathedral City west towards and along the Rimrock Shopping Center, and then along Matthew Drive, and building a flood control basin. That whole area is in a 100-year floodplain, and we have hundreds of properties that are required to have flood insurance. Even if it's a second-story condominium unit, they're required to have flood insurance because they are part owners in the common space that's in a flood zone. So it's become an issue for homeowners in that area when they refinance or sell, because a lot of homeowners weren't aware of the need to have flood insurance until they refinance or sell. But it's in a floodplain, and it's one of our top priority projects. So that $1 million we have is really allocated to that project, which flood control, Riverside County Flood Control District has been working on for many years. This storm drain line is on our drainage plan and would pick up and intercept the runoff that flows down San Rafael Drive to Sunrise Way. And today it heads south, it's very flat along Sunrise in that stretch. And so when we have storms, that area often floods. And that was the nature of this gentleman's request. When Serena Park was proposed, it was one of the issues that I raised to the team, and I said, well, hey, you have a storm drain line on our master drainage plan that extends through your site, and normally, as with public streets, they have to improve and install public streets or major storm drain lines that are on our general plan. But there has to be a reasonableness test. So they were subject to a drainage acreage fee, which I forget the number, but it was a couple $100,000. And when they analyzed the cost of extending this storm drain line from San Rafael and Sunrise through their site, and actually I forgot I have these, I'm sorry. I'm going to pass these around. Some of them. It's a significant system, and it would be a huge benefit to installing it. The problem is it's not a priority because none of those properties in that part of the city are in a 100-year floodplain, and that's the priority, is installing these storm drain systems where they take properties out of a 100-year floodplain. The flooding's a nuisance, and I'm very familiar with the problems that causes. We would have required the installation of that storm drain as part of the Serena Park project had it not been for the $5 or $6 million cost of installing the storm drain compared to the $300,000 or $400,000 drainage fee that they have to pay. So they're only legally obligated to pay the drainage fee or install storm drain improvements if there's a storm drain that crosses through their property. But and so on that basis, they were not legally obligated to pay the full cost of a $6 million improvement. But they are providing the easements across the property at no cost to us because it's on the drainage plan, so that in the future that storm drain potentially could be installed. So because of the shortage of drainage fees, the only other option is Measure J, general fund, other funds, and so that's what brought this gentleman to you today. And I would just note, when we first identified the whole list of potential projects the first year of Measure J, I actually listed a whole bunch of storm drain projects, which were really big ticket items because they're very expensive, given the type of construction and the nature of the construction. So, to his credit, we've identified this. It's not on your unfunded project list, again, because it's not a project that we've identified as a critical project. It's an important project, but there's a number of other storm drains throughout the city where we have historic flooding. Farrell and Ramon is one, you know. So there's a number of other locations throughout the city where we just haven't yet had the resources to be able to extend the storm drains to pick up where we have historic flooding problems. But I thank the gentleman for bringing it to our attention, because we should not lose sight of the fact that we do have a need to implement our drainage plan. It's a less sexy project, and it's one that we don't often need until we have the few times a year where it rains and we're inconvenienced for, you know, a couple days or a few hours, depending on the storm, of the need to install these storm drains. So I don't know if that helps or addresses his concerns, but that's the state of affairs with our drainage system.
All right. Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So, I'm assuming we know this is a problem. Has staff ever recommended to the council they increase these fees? Because it doesn't sound, I'm looking at the size of these projects, and $200,000 just doesn't seem like enough.
That gets into the drainage impact fees and the process we have to go through to establish those fees. You know, the fees were established with the original master drainage plan in the 80s, and then there were slight increases over time. But it's probably worthy of consideration and by the council the next time we do a development impact fee. But the drainage fee is one of the larger fees that owners pay with their building permit, that and the sewer fee. So, but it's just these little small incremental payments that we receive, you know, because for a typical single-family home, the total building permit is maybe, you know, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, depending on the size of the home. And so $400 or $500 is a big chunk of that when you look at it in that perspective.
Yes. Commissioner Hunt?
Is, just speculating, but is there anything that the neighbors, the residents at that end of Sunrise could do in advance to document or demonstrate the need for drainage help there that might convince City Council at some point to consider a different level of funding, or moving that into a different position on the list of projects? I'm not sure even what to ask for. I'm just thinking from a proactive neighborhood position, what can that neighborhood do to get them ready to go to City Council with, you know, some actual documentation to show what their need is?
Yeah, I don't know if he's taken photos, but photos will tell the story.
Okay, so photos.
Yeah.
I have taken photos
Okay.
already.
Okay.
And that's the issue we're talking about. It's a real safety issue for a long.
Yeah, and I heard that.
So, and a liability issue to the city is just, I mean, we talk about $6 million. If there's, you have where someone's killed, that's a drop in the bucket. So I guess the city's willing to take that risk at this point. If I understand the priorities of the 100-year flood thing, it just comes to mind that, you know, loss of life, especially in the area of Rapid Club and Sunrise, there's water accidents. And now that we're gonna extend Sunrise and all these other buildings, it sounds like it's just gonna be worse. So now it's getting a shovel ready kind of thing for this development. It seems like this is the right time to do it. It's gonna be less expensive. But again, that's just for the
Money, yeah, and it's a money thing, so, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That was very helpful. Okay. Thomas, on the unfunded capital projects, are you going to?
So we have a new list, or an updated list. This was developed based on previous direction by the commission and also by input from staff and city management. There are a couple of new projects on here that you might notice. One is the Caltrans standard mandate for changing our striping requirements in the city. You'll see that as number 14. There are also some additional maintenance and upkeep projects in there that came from the city maintenance department. The top projects under the engineering department are the bollards, phase 2, and both phases of the keyless entry program.
Those are the top?
Those are the top two.
Okay.
And I believe Franco has been working with this Measure J list far longer than I have. And if you'd like to weigh in on any of these, I'd greatly appreciate the input.
Certainly. The two that Tom mentioned, I believe, are priorities. Keyless entry system, we're finalizing the plans and hopefully go out to bid soon. And it'd be great to have some funds programmed for that when we do award the contract and consider to start with the new access card readers and control panels and so forth. Bollards, phase 1, we went out to bid. We got a contractor on board. We're executing the contract and then shortly just order the material. The Caltrans striping from 4 to 6 inch, I think that's an important one. That would be a number 3 if we're looking at top 5.
What stripes are you having to increase? Everything, side,
Right. So,
center as well?
so quickly, the city striping configuration is all made of non-reflective dots. And Caltrans did an assessment where they said, we're removing these non-reflective dots from our standard drawings to our state highways because it doesn't help with nighttime visibility. It's not well with the elders, and more so, they're looking a way to migrate into what's coming, autonomous and connected vehicles and so forth, and those won't work well. So what they've decided to do is all of their stripes are 4 inches wide. They're yellow, they're white stripes in the center on the lane lines. And what they've done is in their new standard update is they've increased that to 6 inch wide. And that study recommended that with the 6 inch wide, you'll have that nighttime visibility. You know, autonomous and connected vehicles will be able to detect the lanes easier and so forth. So a lot of agencies in the Coachella Valley are looking into adopting that and applying that 6 inch wide stripe to their local streets, so making them wider. You know, again, we are just full of bot dots right now, which are non-compliant anymore, and we should be taking small steps to converting into stripes, and it would be best to get the 6 inch wide stripes.
And if I can add to that, the direction from Caltrans was based on requirements from federal highways. The same as we had to do with the reflectivity on signs. This is reflectivity on roadways now. So this is Caltrans' attempt to be compliant with direction from federal highways.
Go ahead.
So as streets are repaved this year, they will be striped with 6 inch stripes?
That's correct. Both the maintenance and the slurry seal projects will all do the new striping standard.
Mr. Marshall?
That's part of my question, I guess. So this applies to all our streets, not just where 111 goes, it's under Caltrans?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and here it says mandate. So are you required to have that done under a certain period of time?
It's not a requirement to have it done in a certain period of time, but it's the existing are no longer standard. They're, so anytime we touch a street, we'll be going to a new standard. So it is a mandate. Once we put them into place, we have to maintain them And that's what this equipment is for, is now we're going to have a citywide striping contract.
So that will be a purchase, the paint striper
Correct.
will own that, okay.
And is this for new streets, or are we going to be picking and choosing other streets that are just at random to stripe?
The way we've been implementing it is, again, on all the maintenance. And if there happens to be a section of street between two maintenance projects, or the maintenance project doesn't take it to a logical terminus, we would look to extend the striping on the existing pavement to that logical terminus.
Commissioner Hammond?
So this is the striping that you'll do on Farrell, north of Tockwitz to
Tamarisk.
Tamarisk?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes, go ahead.
Is the paint actually more reflective, or just the wider stripe makes the difference in being reflective?
The paint is actually more reflective than the non-reflective pavement markers. Though the width of the stripe also helps with that, but they put glass beads on the paint, and I don't know if you've seen any of a new striped road, but it is very reflective. And if anyone has driven Racket Club, where it makes the bend at Farrell, that finding lane lines there is challenging with our current striping configuration.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Commissioner Gazan?
So is it more economical for the city to actually own the truck with the mounted paint stripper? I mean, or is this something that the contractor who's actually doing the road work would supply as part of the bid? Because to me, it looks like you are requesting or looking at the city would actually own this truck with the mounted paint striper, as opposed to the construction company that's doing the resurfacing or slurry seal would just come in with their own equipment and do the striping.
And again, that gets back to the implementation of the new striping. If the city is doing it on a rehab project, it's going to take quite some time to get the entire city converted. What this would do is pick up additional segments. And so we would be able to be in conformance much quicker. Also, once we put the striping down, every 2-3 years, it's going to have to be restriped. So rather than contracting out, we can do that in-house on a rolling basis. That way we don't have to go out in one fell swoop.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
So to continue on the list, recap, Keyless Entry, number 1, Bollards, number 2, Caltrans Standards, 4 to 6 in stripe, number 3. Our number 4 is, if you go to item 10, emergency generators at city facilities. I think that's an important project to consider for the new fiscal year. And our number 5 would be item 13, park restrooms renovation repairs at Demuth, Victoria, Sunrise, and Ruth Hardy. I think it's important to take a look at that and upgrade our park restrooms.
Could you give us those number rankings again real quick?
Sure. 1 is Keyless Entry. 2 is Bollards. 3 is Caltrans Standard mandate, number 14. 4 is emergency generators.
Number 10.
And 5 is park restrooms renovations and repairs. And that's our suggested list, certainly.
Sure. Commissioner?
I was just curious, how does the restroom renovations dovetail into number 4, which is Demuth Park ADA access? Are all the other restrooms ADA accessible? I don't know.
That's a great question, and I actually looked at that before I attended the meeting. The Demuth ADA Access Phase 2, that is a study which looked at all the access to our restrooms and to not just restrooms, but facilities. So it would be, if there was a workshop or a concession stand, access to drinking fountains, etc. The Demuth ADA Access Phase 2, all that would be site improvements to those areas. Number 13 is actually repairs inside the restroom. So outside of the ADA, so it could be floor wall tile needs to be repaired, new sinks, new doors, etc.
Yes.
Will you be doing anything with security in and around restrooms with this project? And if, well, lighting would be one, but I'm also thinking whatever other security the Parks Department needs. But
Yeah, they can't be inside.
But if, okay, go ahead. That is something that we'll need to speak with Stacy. She's our Director of Maintenance Facilities. Also speak with our folks in the Park Department and see if that was ever considered and if it's incorporated into the budget that you see here. If not, then I think those are great additives to be. I'm just thinking about the presentation we had several months ago from Parks Department about security being a concern. So if you haven't already talked to the Parks Department, I would encourage that. And if it's not possible to actually install the security systems while the restrooms are under renovation, if it's possible to wire for future security systems, maybe that would help with the cost when it finally comes to.
We can include the conduit for future use, or if they choose to go wireless, provide power at various locations. But I would seriously doubt that this would have enough funding for a citywide surveillance program.
Well, Commissioner Marshall first, and then Commissioner Craig.
Well, yeah, I know it's not your top five, but back to the ADA, is that something we can get grants on?
Yeah. There are grants that are available for ADA improvements, for park improvements also. They become challenging in that the majority of the grants go to low-income and disadvantaged areas. But again, it wouldn't preclude us from attempting to get them.
Well, Demuth seems to service a lot of those people, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Craig.
I wanted to say, coming from Parks and Rec, there's been a lot of public testimony coming from the public to the meetings about repairing the bathrooms. So I'm glad to see this is on here, because there really was a lot of public comments about going to the parks with families and that, and the conditions of them. And the Commissioner Hammond had brought up the fact about security. That's been an issue to people as well.
Yeah, sure, Commissioner
Just a
Williams.
personal comment. Some years ago, the city redid the bathrooms at the swim center, and you put in these metal toilets that don't have a toilet seat. They look like prison toilets. There must be something better we can put in our parks. I don't know if you've seen those, but go over and look at those. And they're just not, it's not a good way to go. I mean, they're there.
Probably cold.
Well, I'm trying to stay away from them. But I mean, they're always, well, you can just imagine. So take a look at those, and I don't think that's a good solution. Maybe there's something, I know people rip off toilet seats and that sort of thing, but it's got to be a better way.
Yes, Commissioner.
I realize we're not making a decision today, correct, on these?
Correct.
So
That
we're
is
just kind of
absolutely correct.
discussing these and getting staff's input as far as priority. I'm just curious, what has come to either staff or council or to 1PS on this list from the public? I'm curious where the rallying cry has been, if any, on any of these line
Okay,
items.
these are coming from staff. They all come from staff. The only public input are the community projects that we do. So all of this comes from staff.
Well, I realize that, but there is community input on some of this, as far as I know with Caltrans, which is a priority, for striping. We have 3 neighborhoods that were very vocal about restriping a section of Farrell to make it a safer street and to calm traffic. So, so when I look at that, I guess as far as future evaluation, I'm just curious if there was any public input, because public does have opinions on some of these items. Some of them are very facility related and very maintenance related that that are not going to fall to the general public. So I guess that's kind of where I was coming from, as far as if there are any that have been a major push from the public.
Okay. Commissioner Marshall, do you want to jump in here?
Well, I do. I'm going to follow up with your question, but first I'm going to ask Jeff.
Use your microphone.
First, I want to ask Jeff, when we're looking at this budgeting, we're looking at the 2 million. This is for 18 and 19, correct?
You read my mind.
Okay.
Yes,
I want
that's
to clarify that. Number 2, where are we with community projects, 17, 18, $1,202,000? Now, I know I think we decided to go the first 2 years that will go into safety projects.
Yeah.
We saved a lot of money. Did we save enough to actually use some of that community projects back to Jim's? No.
No.
That's my question.
That money came from savings from previous projects and 2 years of Measure J funds to match the grant that
Right.
we have from CVAG.
So
for
we've
a
already really
total
budgeted that community project. That's what I'm
The
asking.
total project cost is $10 million that
We gave 2 million.
our community project
So
money,
the
yeah.
17, 18, and 18, 19 have basically been budgeted to meet that grant.
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Okay.
Because later community, I think Jim's right, later community projects, we could use some of that, look at that.
Well, and I think I understand vetting projects like this with the public, but I think part of it is that we are the public, and maybe we could be talking to our neighbors about these projects and bringing that information back here. Just-
Commissioner Bixon?
If I may, remember to turn off your microphones when you're done with them. If you get yelled at, fine.
Okay, could someone tell me something about number 19, the citywide water treatment program, and what kind of priority that might be?
I'm afraid I don't have information on that item. I'd have to contact Stacy and find out what specifically that pertains to.
Are there additional priorities after your first 5, or is that the list?
Well, it's all a priority. But those would be our suggested top 5 at this moment.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask commissioners a question. If we go back to our roadmap, as we call it, for the new commissioners, this is our proposed calendar for the year. We actually addressed this item a meeting ahead of what our calendar said. So I will point out that we have currently scheduled for February 15th to review the list of previously unfunded capital projects. At the March meeting, to have staff present the finalized list for capital projects. And then at the April meeting, to have the commissioners vote on your recommended list. Since we're dealing with this item right now, would you like to tweak this little plan for the next few meetings in any way? is this would be an appropriate time to give your direction on how do you want to spend your next 3 meetings, since this is the focal point of the next 3 months.
Commissioner Gray?
Yeah, for us who are sort of new, I consider myself fairly well educated, but it's a list. Maybe at next month's meeting, at least the priorities plus maybe the 5 after that, so 10 top priorities, could be explained a little bit in more detail so we know what you're really talking about. And, I know what a bollard is, but I'm not sure why phase 2 and what the purpose is and why you need them and so forth and so on. So, I know what a keyless entry is, but where is this going to be? How much does this cover? It's just a list. And if someone were to ask me, well, what did you vote on? I couldn't really explain what that was. So I think we probably need more information. I'm not sure I want to move the calendar, but I would like to have a better description of what it is we're talking about.
Yeah, what happened here is in our last meeting, we were just going to review the unfunded that hadn't come into 2018, and we didn't finish that. We decided to finish it here, and it's kind of moved into this direction.
That's correct. And what we, for the benefit of the commissioners, the chair and I had a discussion, and the request was made based upon the last meeting. Could you please take off the previously approved items, because those were confusing to still have on the list. And since we were doing that adjustment, the question was asked, well, are there any other items that you know about you'd like to go ahead and add to the list? And that's how these other items ended up being here, and we ended up being actually a little bit ahead of schedule on looking at things. I think my recommendation would be we could just continue this item to the next meeting if staff would have an opportunity to expand their descriptions. What we used to have, for the benefit of Tom, is we used to have a 1-page description of the project, and there was a form that was used in the past. I don't know if that even makes sense anymore, but it sounds like
I
it
believe
would.
we provided the commission with the description of the projects back in October. Some of the
So
projects. I don't know if
we
they're
could
the ones
probably get for you what was provided previously, and you can work with that to come up with whatever is most suitable for explaining the project.
I think it'd be very helpful to have a project description, possibly a map showing the location and additional information so you can make an educated decision.
Yeah, I'm not asking for a lot. I'm just asking for, like a paragraph. Commissioner Bixson asked you a question, and you said, well, I don't know what that is. So, I think anything that's on the list, we should at least have a paragraph descriptor as to what it is, where it is, time frame, what's the, why is it necessary? Is this, the mandated one, you went into a lot of detail and that made sense. But these others, we don't necessarily, like library, corporation, yard, and fleet maintenance, that just seems like, well, that's a catch-all. I don't know if that's a catch-all or what that means.
That was going to be one of my questions. That would be great. That would be absolutely great if you could do that. Thank you very much. Anyone else on? Yes.
I just
Commissioner
want to
Marshall?
emphasize, I would like the next 5 as well.
Oh, I think he was going to do that, but go ahead.
You're going to do them all?
If I may, we can do the top 10, but it would be great to get input from the commissioners on the ones that they would like to see, have information on. We can do this entire list, but if there are ones that drop out.
I love shopping.
I've got a
Is
question.
that something you want to
Okay.
talk about today, or you want to?
Well, go that far today. We really we're going to do that in the February meeting. So there's a great idea. Why don't we do that to save some time? Everybody email their top 5. We've done that before, and it worked out really, really well.
So Mike, I've
Case
got,
would be the second five.
This was the second five, yes, right. R5. There,
I've got a general question then.
yes, go ahead.
So being semi-new and for the other new members, so when I look at this, this is going to be for consideration for 2018, 2019, correct? These are additional unfunded capital projects that are in addition to what we already have earmarked on this other multi-year summary, correct? So we are dealing with a beginning balance of what we think projection-wise with tax increases or increased revenue of 13,800,000. So we are kind of starting with that figure, correct? And any other monies that might be left over. Okay. And then we take out what is already earmarked, so 3 million for street repairs, trash service, buzz program, unless that goes away, downtown park, uptown parking structure, which may or may not come due. So we're basically just, again, so I can pick my top 5 logically, we're looking at, okay, Jim, you take this 13.8, you deduct what's already earmarked, and then
My
what's
suggestion
left
wouldn't
is-
be focus on dollars. My suggestion would be just focus on what you think are the priorities.
Well, I mean, I understand that, but it's still, it costs money.
Everything does, and I am the most aware of that. But I also am most aware that these numbers are in flux. So, for example, if the item that was discussed before about ONDOTS, if that gets put off another year, then all of a sudden you have another $2 million
Sure.
available. That's a pretty
And
good
I realize
example.
that, but I
right
also
there.
just want to be realistic with the
Yeah,
budget.
sure,
You
sure.
know, we could go hog wild and say, yeah, let's spend the 5 million right now on the Plaza Theater.
Right.
But
Right.
that's not realistic.
The other thing I think I would suggest, all these numberings was from the remnant of the prior year's list, and they're not relevant anymore. So we probably should come up with another presentation method. There was also a secondary list that was kind of the pie in the sky items, like soccer field at Demuth Park, that kind of thing. It's like $8 million. It's probably important not to lose sight of that list, which was really kind of unrealistic for short term, but it was something that I believe Commissioner Hammond really, made the point several times that if the commission wants to have, really legacy projects, standout ones, you may want to pick something like that to consider too. And I think it just didn't end up on this list because it was so out there. And the commission kind of settled in on, let's make the downtown park the next, really key legacy project for this commission. That's just a little history of how we got to where we're at.
Commissioner Gray.
The other thing that, sort of with what you're saying, I mean, a lot of these projects don't happen over one fiscal year. So, you can, let's take I'll go with the Plaza Theater, it's on this list. Okay, it's a $5 million project. Well, that's not going to happen in 12 months. I don't, no project happens in 12 months. So one of the things that sort of also is missing is how long that takes. So if a project's going to take 18 months, 24 months, that's a 2-year project, and we could allocate some money in 1 year, but then some money in the next year. And so it's kind of like saying, well, you have to have the whole thing in 1 year. That's kind of not how I know the city works, and I know how the library's funds work and all that. That's not how it works. So it doesn't work that way. What really happens is you have it in a budget, but it may not actually come out that year. And if we have to actually spend the money, which is what I understand we are supposed to try to do, and not to carry lots of money over every year, then I think it would also be helpful in our description to know that this is an 18-month project, this is an estimated 2-year project, this is a 3-year project. I don't know. You know, or yes, we're going to buy a truck, and obviously that's done with. But some of these things on here, I'm a little unclear as to, you know, phase 1 might be the correct thing to do for 1 year. Phase 2 could be the next year. Phase 3 could be the year following. So that's kind of a little bit more information that I think we could make some better judgments, because we might be able to get more than 5 things, because we don't need to take the total cost here. We only need to take the cost for that particular, this first particular year. Obviously, it commits us to into the next year, but I'm, as a commissioner, not as concerned about that. I am concerned with getting projects on the drawing table and moving them along. But we all know that many of these projects, you know, you vote on them and they just actually don't get happen until that next fiscal year. And it just takes too long.
That's actually a very good point, and the police department remodel is a good example of that. When the project was originally recommended by the commission, there was acknowledgement that it would probably be done over 3 years, and I believe the initial allocation was about $500,000, and then we were looking at $1.2 million the next 2 years, and in the last several months, we had identified, well, we'll probably need an extra $500,000 in that third year, and that's how we got to where we're at. And you're right, we did, as we presented it and made recommendations, we went ahead and laid it out like we do on this other page, saying let's look at this amount in year 1, year 2, year 3. There have been several projects that have been budgeted or earmarked for those future years in that same manner.
Commissioner Hammond?
Listening to the conversation, it is the evolution of a project is just that, an evolution. You don't just decide on Saturday morning you're going to do X, Y, and Z, run to Home Depot, pick up the supplies, come home and do it. And I think it would be helpful to see that evolution, and, you know, picking a project like the bollards and what's involved. What does that project go through before it actually is implemented? And that then helps us understand how long it takes to, when we have to allocate the money for it and how long it has to be allocated for. Because it's a long process to get from concept to completion. And is that something that, and it, you know, it would have to be an example because most projects are different and require different time frames, but it would be helpful just to see that, you know, before we do sidewalks, it has to go through a design phase and all of the different steps that would go to before it ever goes out to bid even. So that might be helpful.
If I may, there's also, what might be helpful is how some of these projects tie to existing projects that are either being built or in design or being constructed by the private sector. The bollards is a great example where that ties into a previous project that we're doing and a project that is being done by the private developer. And this would just be an extension of that street safety program. But there are other sidewalk gap closures, all these where the item title may not reflect how it ties into other funded or under construction projects throughout the city.
Any other questions? I have one. My big notice was not what's on it, but what's off it, and that is the Indian Canyon two-way conversion that has fallen off this list.
Has not fallen off this list.
It's not on this list.
I believe, well, we're working on it. The city council has already authorized the design plans to go forward.
when it was on prior, there was $3 million. So could we add that back on this list so we have it in front of us? So when we're, because it seems to be a priority for the city council. or at
Wasn't there
least some
some
of the
general
members.
fund money that was going for that rather than Measure J, or is that all Measure J?
J.R. Roberts said Measure J, and then Mayor Moon said, well, you know, it's not a bottomless pit of money, so I'm not sure. But certainly Measure J was mentioned in that city council meeting as a possible funding of that.
Right, okay. So I think what we'll do is next month we'll include it. That dollar amount may change. Because we've been successful with CVAG, one of our projects is the Indian Corridor ped enhancement. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to see, well, what type of improvements would benefit pedestrian safety? And one item, I mean, based just my opinion as a traffic engineer, is converting a one-way to a two-way. One-way streets, you get a lot of high traffic speeds. When you reduce it, when you change it to a two-way conversion, it slows down the speeds. So we're going to be working with our design consultant next week. They're actually coming in to give us a presentation on where they're at with the design for the ped enhancements on Indian, ped enhancements on Palm Canyon, and the southeast Palm Canyon curve. And we're hoping to get, you know, some of the things that we've identified in the two-way, such as bulb outs. You know, that's another ped improvement. Well, you know, let's look at including that into the Indian Canyon corridor and utilize those funds to be able to improve as much as we can. So I think we'll work internally, we'll look at the dollar amount, and then we'll put it back on the list.
Great. Commissioner Hammond?
Is it possible to separate out the cost of the roundabout in that project so that we can see what the roundabout costs separate from the actual roadway costs? And I'm thinking that some people might even consider something like that a park, a mini park. Not that we would go out into it, but something beautiful to look at. And, you know, it might be an interesting thing to fantasize about.
We can separate out the cost of the roundabout, but we would want to include whatever improvements are called out in the project, because we can't just do we have to merge the traffic
Right.
someday.
And I get that, I get that, yeah.
Can I make, since we seem to have some extra time in our schedule, can I suggest that maybe, if it's not too much work for staff, they come back with more of a brief description of these projects, and then we hold off on our second five until we have a more thorough understanding of what each one is?
I mean, well, what he's saying is, instead of sending in our emails with our favorite five, wait until after the next meeting, and then when we're more informed, that's a decision. I mean, we could do that. I don't know if it's necessary, but.
I think the reason they asked us to do that is because they didn't know if they didn't want to describe all of these. They wanted to describe 10. So that's how we got to that extra 5. But I don't think, and I know there's 20 numbers on here, I don't think that we need a lot of description on a lot of them. But, you know, it could be just a sheet with 3 or 4 sentences under each one or something. And, you know, maybe we can just bring the whole list back. I don't see us needing to sort it out at that point, because I personally wouldn't know how to send you my next 5, because I don't really know anything about them, as you're saying too. So, but I don't want you to spend a lot of time, you know, going page after page after page of a descriptor either. I think we just need a little bit more information, that's all.
But you do make a very good point, because I actually tried to research some of these that I didn't quite understand, and it was difficult, to say the
I have no
least.
idea what cogeneration plant coils are, so.
Yeah,
And you
so
really don't want to know what those
that's,
are. But
is that combined heat and power?
no. But I understand, and it's a great point, that it's difficult to make a decision on what your top 5 are if we aren't describing these projects adequately. Is there a possibility of providing that information to you? If we can, I'll work with staff and see what we can come up with, and hopefully come up with a place where we can put these that you would all have access to. And that way the descriptions would be there for your perusal, rather than waiting for a next meeting to.
That makes sense.
I can go coordinate with you and then set up a time frame, and I can distribute to the commission.
Excellent.
That'd be great. Yes, Commissioner.
So maybe with that, and again, as I'm learning all of this, kind of the necessity of it, you know, with these plant coils, do these coils have a shelf life? Are they going to go bad in a year from now, 2 years from now? If a coil goes out, does the City Hall go dark? You know, maybe something of the necessity of that. And then also, I think, and this will be part of our discussion as a commission, does this really get funded by Measure J? And I realize Measure J is a little cloudy. It can go to city services, but shouldn't that be something that's under general fund because it's maintenance and upkeep? And it's something we know is going to happen. If Measure J didn't exist, that coil would have to somehow get paid for. Otherwise, City Hall goes black.
Well, I'll just mention that, as the city manager has said several times in the last several years, except for the airport, and the wastewater treatment plant, the Measure J fund has basically become our capital program. So, and Measure A, of course. But I understand your point, but we typically have not funded any capital out of the general fund. Not to say that we can't, but it's been pretty much spoken for in every other area. We have done some year-end transfers to capital funds where we've had special needs, and we've had some extra funds that appear at the end of the year, so we close out the books. We've done that before too. But for major projects, there isn't enough capacity in the general fund to do these projects.
So, yeah, then maybe it would be helpful just to have maybe some type of a date of when that's needed. You know, obviously the coils have gotten brought up by someone, and that this has been identified by the facilities group that this has got to get replaced at some point. So it would be helpful just to know, yeah, this has to be done by 2020, or we're in serious dire, you know, a roofing project has to be done by such a date, because if we don't do it, it's going to cave in, and then it's a $100,000 project is now $1 million project.
So what we're asking is, what is this item and why is it on the list?
I want to put the staff to work just for us. I mean, a very brief description, I think, is all we need. And that's, yeah.
What we're going to do is you're going to work with Ariana, put together some descriptions. She will distribute them to the commission. Then we will send in our top 5 and be prepared for the next meeting. Okay? All right, sounds good. Okay, anything else on unfunded projects? Okay, the next item is discussion continued on funding of the Buzz Trolley.
Question on that, please.
Go ahead. All right, I was going to tell that, but go ahead. What it is actually not, we're not deciding whether it should be funded. The city council will determine that. What we're going to discuss today is whether it's appropriate that Measure J is funding it. That's the discussion we're going to have. So it's up to the city council whether they want to continue to fund it, but if they make the decision to continue to fund it, should it be out of Measure J?
And I was just going to say, given the information that David Reddy shared with us about council studying this and discussing it in February, I was wondering if we would want to defer this until we had more information on the ridership revenue possibilities, how to save dollars and route changes. So I was just going to suggest deferring it to the next meeting.
I would agree with that if we were deciding whether we were going to fund it or not, but where the discussion really is it appropriate that it's coming from Measure J?
Okay.
And so
I totally agree.
I think we could discuss it, and I actually have, I hope, Thomas, you're not leaving because I have a question for you here. before we get going. When we talk about infrastructure, right, which is what Measure J is all about, I did a little homework, and there's this category that you know about, but it's new to me, is public works infrastructure. And so when this, was the original intention to include public works infrastructure, or are we just talking about bridges and roads? Because doing a little homework, they have this category called mass transit under public works infrastructure. And it basically, I won't read it all here unless everybody wants to hear it, but it describes the buzz, basically. And so where previously me doing this, I'd kind of questioned whether the buzz should be. If public works infrastructure does fall under our venue, then I think there is an argument that the buzz should be funded through Measure J. And so that's why it would be helpful if you could answer that.
Unfortunately, I'm rather new to how Measure J was formulated and approved. So I would have to defer to the longer term members of staff and management to make that call. But I can research it and get back to you on that.
Well, I wasn't with the commission when they came to y'all with the buzz. Was any discussion of that?
Let's just clarify that we never discussed the buzz. The buzz was not discussed or approved by the commission. It was done by the city council. The commission really had no input on the buzz.
We did have a subcommittee, though.
Well,
Kristen and
but those of us on the commission, if you recall, we didn't even discuss it before it was approved at the council meeting, which is fine. I don't have an issue with it. It's just we really didn't discuss whether it was appropriate for Measure J funding at that point at all. So,
Okay. Well, I think this is an important distinction, so I would go back to what Vice Chairman Hammond was talking about previously, is I think we need an answer to this question in order to make an intelligent decision on whether it belongs with Measure J or not. Yes.
well, I suggest that considering what we spend other money on, it's equally appropriate to spend it on something, considering that a lot of Measure J dollars come from spending by tourists, and tourists are the ones that use the buzz, and a lot of local people use the buzz as well. I think it's equally appropriate. It's not a decision about whether we can fund it and afford it. It's a decision about, as you said, whether it's an appropriate expenditure,
Right.
and I would argue that it is. And if that's the question you have, that my answer would be, I think so, but that's me.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
And
No, that's
I
fine.
agree, and there's a lot of good feeling about the buzz, and we're always talking about having something tangible to point at that Measure J finances, and the buzz is a really cheerful, and, whether it's used as much as we would hope, maybe not, but it is used, and people enjoy seeing it go from one neighborhood to another.
Yes. Mr. Marshall.
I go along with John. I remember we actually did have a subcommittee that looked at this, and yes, you're right, this council pretty much decided we were going to fund it before we got to that phase. But I do recall there's, at that point of the commissioners, I think a majority in support of it. And as he said, I mean, we got about 80% of our revenue is probably coming from out, from our tourists. What are we giving them in return? And not only that, but I think it also, it's citizens, but businesses are citizens, according to, I think we owe them support as well. So I think it's an appropriate expenditure.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I guess I sort of hear where you're coming from, but I also heard Mr. Keel and I've heard Mr. Reddy, and I already know sort of that the city council can decide they're going to take it out of Measure J, whether you think it's appropriate or not, probably. So
that is accurate.
So therefore, I'm not sure that's a discussion that we need to make. We could recommend it, I guess, or not recommend it, but if they decide they want if they want the buzz, and I think we should keep the buzz, because I certainly think that it is something that is out there, and tourism is important. I think that what I would want to do is to wait for some reports that are going to come back. And I also would then like to say that maybe we would fund it X amount, and we would ask that tourism, TOT, fund it X amount, and maybe something else X amount, so that it's not all funded by Measure J, but that we would be a participant. Maybe there's funding from advertising or whatever. I don't know what they're going to come up with, but that would be my thought, and I think I would kind of want to wait to make any voting decision until we hear kind of what this council wants to do with this project.
Commissioner Kazan?
Yeah, I second David on that. I think initially they needed to get this funded, and Measure J was the quick and easy pot to dip into. And I think it is the belief of a lot of the new council members that there should be other revenue sources to support the buzz. And it may partially still be Measure J, and that's fine. But I think we're all looking kind of in a creative way of there's other parties that can come to the party, to, so to speak, and contribute.
Commissioner Craig?
Will agree with what you're saying. I remember that Councilman Roberts had been advocating more of the private sector coming up with money, and they had some success with the last Festival of Lights parade. So I think that the city needs to look at that more as well and see about other funding, and just not all of it out of here.
Commissioner Bixson?
Yeah, as I said, I'm in favor of keeping the buzz and keeping our contribution to it, particularly since we've been funding it up until now. It would not be good PR for us to stop funding it.
Okay, I think we have two things going on here. We have one which we're going to hold off until the next meeting when we have more information. And then the other is, yes, we should be doing the buzz, which is fine. I'm not here to decide one way or the other. So could we just kind of make a decision on what we need to guide staff?
Okay, I'm fine with postponing the decision.
Go ahead, Commissioner Marshall.
It seems to me, I mean, they're going to discuss this before we meet again. And I think it would be appropriate for us to at least say, we've discussed it. We are in strong support of using Measure J funds, but we feel like things need to be negotiated and it shouldn't be carrying the full weight. Something like that, a statement of some sort, so the city council knows where we are at. Because they're going to debate this before we get there.
If that's a motion, I would second it.
Okay.
I think that's a motion.
All right. And seconded by Commissioner Craig. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. The ayes have it.
Can I at least say nay?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes, you may say nay.
So can
Nay.
Okay.
Can you restate what we actually are doing?
Oh, yeah, I'm just saying, Measure J has taken the position that we support the trolley, the buzz, and that, however, we do not feel like we should be bearing the full cost and encourage looking for alternate funding.
Well said.
With Vice Chairman Hammond dissent, correct?
My dissent is, I think we need to get the information that David Reddy is going to bring back before we have that discussion, because we can make we're between a rock and a hard spot with this.
We've had.
It's like having the information to make a decision, or making a decision without the information when it may come back as supporting itself, or they may come back with a recommendation for how to support it, how it can support itself without full funding from Measure J. And frankly, that could change my feelings about supporting the buzz. And without having that information, I would just say, no, I don't support the buzz. I'd like to see funding coming from other resources. So all I'm saying is, let's get the information before I make a stupid decision, you know? And I hope that they come back and say, we know how to support it that isn't totally through Measure J with a loss of money every time it's used. So I would love to have that happen, but right now I don't have that information. So I can't really make an informed decision. I don't have the information to do that. So.
Could we amend the motion to, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud now here, so bear with me a little bit, and say that, yes, we had this discussion, and Measure J Commission is supportive of the buzz, to be funded partially by Measure J, but don't feel that they should bear the whole amount. However, we also need more information before we could make a final decision on the buzz from Measure J's
Are we
standpoint.
dancing on the head of a pin here?
Probably, probably.
I mean, we made the motion, we either rescind the motion, I think we leave it like it is, you know, it's
Have the
5:51.
discussion.
Yeah. Well, I guess priorities. Okay. Well, we have the motion and we have the dissent. And so we'll just go forward with that, with the motion that Commissioner Marshall made and was seconded by Commissioner Craig.
So what staff will do, we'll provide that statement to the city manager. So if there's going to be a staff report or verbal report from him, we'll give that statement to him for the appropriate use with the council. I don't know if they're dealing with it at the
He said
February
at the
7th
next
meeting?
February
7th?
7th.
Okay. Well, their next meeting is actually
Or the February 7th, but it's before,
February
Before
7th.
we meet.
before
Okay.
we meet.
Very good.
Okay, we're moving right along. Okay. Discussion on reducing the number of Measure J commissioners from 9 to 7, effectively July 1, 2018. This has been bannered around since I've been on the commission, and so I thought we should just make it an agenda item and discuss it and make a decision one way or the other. Yes, Commissioner Hammond.
And it has been bantered around for many years. And what I would like to propose is that we have a vote, then a discussion, and then maybe another vote on this. That we give our,
Indicate.
a poll,
A poll.
thank you.
Our gut
Thank you.
instincts
Poll,
first.
not a vote.
Yeah, a poll. I'm
Can I
sorry.
ask a quick question? Was there any verbiage in the original ballot initiative about the number of commissioners, or was that just?
No, the way the ballot was, there was just that there would be citizens' oversight. And
Right.
then when the council set up the commission, they decided on a 9-member commission with 2 alternates.
Right.
As you recall. And after a number of years, the 2 alternates was dropped. And that's where we're at today.
And are most of the commission 7 members, planning, AAC?
The average is about 8, actually.
Yeah.
Truth be known, if you include boards were like 5.6. But when you get the airport commission in that, they have 19.
Well, the airport is the very unique
So it
exception
distorts.
since it has representatives from all the cities and a county representative too. So it's very different.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Are we, if we were to vote on 7, and let's say we had 9 people that wanted to be, can we increase? So you say it's a 7-person commission, but we have, for example, this summer, we'll need 2 new members. 4 members come forward, and they're all very qualified and excited to be a part of the commission. Could we then go to the 9, even though we can be at a minimum of 7 members?
Isn't that a council decision whether we decrease or increase?
It is. And the council actually wants us to make a recommendation one way or the other for their next meeting. They already have put in it as an agenda item.
Yeah, I think to answer your question directly, so you can always have fewer, but you can't arbitrarily add without having it formally approved by the council. So if they held interview, for example, we have a few members that will be having termed
Terming
out
out.
this June 30th. And if we had a dozen people apply, and there was enthusiasm. Well, we like several of them. If they hadn't previously taken action to increase the maximum number size of the commission, then we couldn't do that.
We have 4 terming out, is that right?
Yeah, we have 4.
Yes.
4
And-
terming
and-
out.
And the other little detail was, if you have fewer than your maximum number, and certain members who are termed out are willing to stay on for a little while, they can do that. We had that quite recently
Right.
with Leo Cohen and Aftab Dada.
Can we just go around the room?
Sure. Here, why don't you start with you, Commissioner Williams?
I think we should leave it at 9.
I think, I agree with the 9. I agree with the 9. I think we've found times when we needed a quorum. And if there are work down the road that needs a lot of committees, it doesn't put the onus on a lot of, and just a few people.
Commissioner Hamlin?
Oh, you're going to wait
I'm
till
going
the
to
end.
wait till the end, yeah.
Okay, I agree with 9.
Well, I'm too new to be knowing whether 7 or 9 is the appropriate number, so I think I'm going to defer I have no comment.
Okay.
I'll go with your wisdom and stick with 9.
Commissioner Craig?
I go with your wisdom and I stick with 9.
Commissioner
I
Dixon?
like 9 because with 7, with 1 or 2 absences, there's a problem. And as Commissioner Marshall said, we need subcommittees, and it's hard to do that with only 7.
Okay, well, I concur. I think that we should stay with 9, and that'll be our message to the city council.
Make a motion, we recommend the city council. Make a motion, we recommend the city council, we leave the commission at 9 members.
Second.
Lots of seconds. All right, that simplifies that. Yes, we have to vote on it, okay. Well, actually, we could probably get away with, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any nays? No. Okay, pass. Okay, we still might make 6. Appoint 2 members to the new Downtown Park Ad Hoc Committee. And so I think probably the easiest way to address this is to see who would volunteer, who would like to be on this committee. I know we have some people that are already on committees. They probably don't want to be on 2. Sid's already got his hand open, which doesn't surprise me since he comes from Parks and Rec. But, yes, who would like to volunteer?
I would have some interest in this, actually, from a design
Craig?
standpoint.
You 2 were on the communications committee, yeah.
Yeah, I think what we'll try to do is.
Well, can I speak to that? I would prefer to be on a communications committee than a downtown park committee, since that's my professional background. So if somebody wishes to jump off of communications when they just were
would be
appointed, then
happy
I'll do
to.
that.
I think you just sold it.
I'd be happy to switch.
Could I just make a comment?
You may.
I think that's very appropriate, because probably this committee is not going to do very much until 4 of us term out. So I think Sid being brand new and Jim being sort of new would be great, or maybe you, one of you 2. But I think the rest of us will be gone before anything happens, so.
Okay, so what we're hearing
So-
here is Commissioner Gray, you have something, Commissioner
So then
Dixon?
what becomes of the communication committee?
It'll stay, okay, that's what I was about to say.
Okay.
Okay, so Commissioner Gray will move to the Communications Commission, Subcommittee,
Okay.
working with you and Commissioner Williams. Then Commissioner Kazan will be on the Downtown Park, along with Commissioner Craig. And this, Mark, you wanted to be on this one?
Well, if you need a third person, but no.
Well, no, they only
No,
wanted 2.
I'm terming out, so I agree with.
But I know this is
John,
something you're really
yeah.
interested in, that's why.
I'd love to, but.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
need an alternate, call me.
Okay, so make a motion that Commissioner Craig and Commissioner Kagan will be Metro J representatives on the Downtown Park Ad Hoc Subcommittee. Do I hear a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, got it.
Do you need to make a motion on
On the change.
appointing me to the communication committee?
We had David Gray to the communications
I second.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Okay. Good move. Thank you. You're right. I'm sure, no, it's good. It's good to make it official. Okay, public comment? I don't see anybody. Staff member comments? Commission member comment? Oh, that's you.
Parks is going to be looking at medallion concept, as I understand. And I do have a concept, so when you guys get ready to meet, if you could let me know, I have a suggestion.
Right?
Yes.
On that subject, we need to have a meeting with the communications committee. And one of the things we talked about was medallions for Measure J projects. But I'd like to ask if other commissioners have some, for their other subjects. I remember we talked about the rollout of the movie, which I don't think has come out yet, has it? I haven't seen it on Channel 17. The film that was shown at
The video?
the video, is it on Channel 17?
Yeah, I saw it on there.
Okay, well, I never look at Channel 17. But perhaps how we could get that out to the public somehow, maybe have it shown at various organizations. This is all the committee type of stuff. But I'd like for our committee to meet before the next meeting and then report back to the larger group.
That'd be great.
Okay,
Yeah, terrific.
right.
Okay.
So we'll have to do that.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Do I hear a second? Second. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Good for you. Good for you.
Thanks.